Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Fran, I'm from Venezuela, and today we are going to be watching a video called 6 British things that are actually American. Let's check it out and comment, like, subscribe, and start.
Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to things and stuff. Specifically, things and stuff that are widely synonymous with one country but unbeknownst to most of us were invented in the other.
Like referring to just objects?
Today,
or
we're going to look at 6
like
British
concepts?
things that, against all odds, are actually American. And you might be wondering, Lawrence, you're British. Why would you choose to show up your country in favour of the United States? Well, firstly, you hypothetical person, my official nationality is British American. And secondly, I recently gave Britain its due in the much heralded video 6 American things that are actually British. I'll link to that video at the end. And if you would like to be alerted about all future videos and haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, do that now. In the meantime, allow me to inflate your brain with facts so beautiful they belong in the Louvre or the discount bins at Walmart. When I first moved to the United States all of those years ago, people would ask me, Lawrence, apart from your family and Yorkshire puddings, what do you miss most about Britain? And my answer was always the same. British chocolate. I mean, sure, your average American grocery store might carry 1 or 2 Cadbury bars and mini eggs, but Crunches, Twirls and Whisper bars were a lot harder to come by. However, America's confectionery aisles did contain one divisive British chocolate bar that I happen to love. Bounty. Okay, fantastic. I can live with that, except 2 of the things that I just said are completely and utterly a little bit false. The Bounty, a chocolate-covered coconut-filled fixture of UK sweet shelves, is not actually British at all, but American. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, Britain sells M&M's, Snickers,
I was going to say, I didn't know that it was
what
British.
Makes Bounty
well,
so
but
special?
people thought it was
and
British.
In some respects, you raise a valid point, especially since the wrapper is plastered with obviously Hawaiian imagery. You see, I always just thought that this was a product of fantastical marketing, kind of like how Britain came up with the world's most famous bears despite the total absence of bears in the British wild. Furthermore, this one is special in part because of its name, which brings me on to lie number 2, the truth of which is this. Americans don't call them bounties. Here, the bar is branded differently depending on whether it's light or dark chocolate, with the names Almond Joy and Mounds applied respectively. Both were launched in the first half of the 20th century in the United States. And it was only a few years later, in 1951, that Mars Incorporated, which had no trademark attachment to the American varieties, launched Bounty in the UK and Canada as straight-up imitations. Sandwiched in between the launch of these sugar-laden chocolate bars was an even bigger killer. World War Part 2. Thankfully, as an antidote to the horror and misery unfolding before them, both countries found comfort in music. Most famously, American band leader Glenn Miller was hugely popular on both sides of the Atlantic, to the tragic extent that he disappeared over the English Channel in 1944. As it happens, Britain's most lauded wartime music icon herself became synonymous with the English Channel. In addition to singing the famous World War II hit and Dr. Strangelove outro track, We'll Meet Again, Vera Lynn soothed Britain with the equally hopeful White Cliffs of Dover. As the Luftwaffe homed in on Britain, who wouldn't have found comfort in the prophecy, there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover? Well, for one, ornithologists, because there are no f***ing bluebirds in Britain. In fact, they're entirely endemic to North America, which also appears to have been true of the song's lyricist. After it was released, New Yorker Nat Burton insisted he didn't realise that England didn't have bluebirds. Still, nice sentiment, Nat, if that is your real name. Anyway, speaking of iconic anthems, that brings us on to this.
It's funny, like...
Few things are more British than football, a sport whose origins can be traced back to ancient China. Really? Okay, fine, but few things really are more British than football chants and songs. And perhaps the most iconic anthem in the whole of English football is You'll Never Walk Alone. Appropriately, given the song's title, it is also synonymous with more than one British club, with supporters of both Celtic and Liverpool belting it out before kick-off. In fact, the song is so inextricably linked to Liverpool in particular that those 4 words can be found on the club's badge. It is used in reference to the successful 1963 version by Jerry and or the Pacemakers. At the time, Jerry and or the Pacemakers were a popular group from Liverpool, perhaps second only to the
Wondering
who's failed. I suppose
yes,
the people are never going to know the identity of
what
that
other
group now.
may have overshadowed
so the song
that
and everything
band.
it represents is as Liverpudlian as Albert Dock, except it isn't. You see, unlike the band formerly known as the Quarrymen, Jerry and or the Pacemakers did not write their first few hit singles. And this included You'll Never Walk Alone. But then you knew that if you happened to be a fan of musicals. I once played Prince Dauntless in Once Upon a Mattress, so it's a touchy subject. The piece was in fact the brainchild of American songwriting duo Rodgers and Hammerstein, who included the track on their Broadway smash Carousel. So how did it come to be an anthem for England's most trophy-laden club? Well, by 1963, Jerry Marsden, this time without his pacemakers, is said to have played a demo to Liverpool's legendary manager Bill Shankly, who was like, that is an absolute banger, mate. Inject that shit into my veins. Now, we haven't verified the validity of that quote, but rest assured it was along those lines. Later that year, the song, along with other chart hits of the day, made it onto the terraces of Liverpool's Anfield Stadium. And unlike those other songs, it hasn't left since.
That's crazy. I mean, that's
right. Even the poppies that are worn by us Brits in the lead up to Remembrance Day aren't actually British. But don't take my word for it. Instead, here's me from a year ago discussing it on a YouTube short that you probably missed.
That's crazy.
William
I thought
Michael
it was
an American professor who pioneered the idea of commemorating soldiers with the red poppy. She'd been inspired to push for it after reading the famed poem In Flanders Fields by John McCrae, himself a Canadian lieutenant colonel. While teaching a class to disabled World War I servicemen at the University of Georgia, Moyna saw an opportunity to engineer financial support for the wounded by selling poppies. As a result of her efforts, the American Legion Auxiliary and the British Legion Appeal Fund both formalized the poppy as a symbol of remembrance from 1921. While Britain widely persists with the symbol more than a century later, America has long since phased out the November 11th poppy, with some choosing to wear one during May's Memorial Day. Thanks, Past Lawrence, my neck hurts. And now, just like my mate Daz after an hour on the beach, we go from something red to something even more red.
Redder?
But Father Christmas, one of Santa's pseudonyms while delivering presents in Britain, didn't always wear that particular colour.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's an imaginary figure.
When Santa brought me a protein pack instead of a proton pack. Back up there, mate. Because who was Father Christmas, actually? Well, I won't bore you with all of the details because I already did that in this video. But in a nutshell, it went like this. From English folkloric tradition, Father Christmas was indeed the personification of Christmas. Historically, he went by several names, including Christmas Lord, Prince Christmas, and I'm not making this one up, Captain Christmas. But when settlers boarded ships for the New World, they didn't take Captain Christmas with them, presumably opting for an actual captain. There are two big reasons for this. Number one, 17th century Puritans in England had declared Christmas an affront to God, even banning it at one point. And number two, Puritans in New England kind of viewed things the same way. And so many Christmas traditions were shelved, including Father Christmas. But fear not, because 200 years later, with Puritan influence having long since waned, he returned. However, by the time he was revived by the Victorians, who often depicted him in green robes and a crown ordered on eBay, the US had moved on to other things, such as the Dutch figure Sinterklaas. And at this point you might be thinking, so what, Lawrence? You lied to us. All this tells us is that Father Christmas is still British. Correction, was still British. Because during the 19th century, word of Santa Claus reached England. People seemed to take a shine to him, and although for a while he and Father Christmas remained distinct, our version started taking on elements of that curious fellow from the North Pole. For instance, his crown disappeared and was replaced by a hood, probably also from eBay. His waist became larger and his cheeks rosier. And after Santa Claus was depicted in 19th century cartoons wearing red and white, Father Christmas came to follow suit. I didn't intend that pun, but gosh, it was good. And so today you could argue that he remains Father Christmas in name only, hence why a lot of Brits just call him Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
When you hear the word tea, there's only one country that comes to mind. Britain. I've just realised that's 3 countries. Nonetheless, the British fixation with tea is very real, dating back to the 1660s when it was brought to England by Catherine of Braganza, the future Queen of England. Just over a century later, Britain was so enamored with tea that Americans in Boston famously copied us by hosting a tea party of their own. And on a personal note, the one thing that Americans assume most about me is that I prefer tea to coffee, which is only true if I've had 3 coffees. That said, British people do generally love their tea.
So it's a British man that doesn't like tea. That's weird, right?
Are indifferent. Instead, the latter love their lattes. And so it will surprise absolutely everybody to learn that tea bags were invented not in Britain, but Milwaukee.
Okay, yeah. The actual tea bag, not
patent,
tea
if you
in
will,
general.
was filed in that city in 1903 by its inventors Roberta Lawson and Mary McLaren.
1903, like that's
Within
actually
5
quite
years, the idea
new.
caught the attention of New York importer Thomas Sullivan, who subsequently had them shipped around the world. The tea bags, not the inventors. Today, tea bags are a common household item in Britain,
everywhere.
But Yorkshire tea, which is manufactured 80 miles from my English hometown, owes everything to 2 people 80 miles from this one. Behold, US patent 723287, the tea leaf holder.
I'm sorry, that's crazy. That's so new.
And so, if I've learned anything from this 2-part series, it is that both of my homelands have a rich history of influencing each other. In many ways, our special relationship feels more like one of siblings. We might squabble from time to time, but it's only because we can't stand each other. Soon I'll be looking at recent words that Britain took from America and vice versa. In the meantime, if you haven't seen it yet, here are 6 American things that are actually British. So watch that video next. Until the next time, goodbye.
Yeah, of course. This was really eye-opening. I would think, because I mean I get his point, you know. I think there's a lot of things that are I don't know, you would think like obviously like what's more British than tea, right? But it's like tea bags were actually invented by Americans. But again, you know, I'm curious to see, because I'm guessing there's going to be like a lot of things that you think are super American but are actually British. So, you know, it's whatever. I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like he said, it's like a sibling relationship. You know, there's a lot of things that you take from them, but they take from you. It's not it's kind of like reciprocal in that sense. It's not just like I'm gonna steal things and that's it. But I think my favorite was the bounty. I don't know, I that was surprising to me, because I know bounty bars. They're good, you know. It's coconut and chocolate. I did not knew that. I know them as Bounty. I did not know that you get them like Almond Joy. I know Almond Joy, but I did not know that they were known by other names. So that was quite surprising to me. The thing about, I think what shocked me the most was the poppies. True, like when I think of Remembrance Day and, you know, British Army in general, and World War One, but I think now it's sort of like used for just remembrance and the army in general. I think of poppies and I think of England. So it's weird to think that it was actually like created in America, but then it was like quickly phased out, and they like British just took it from them. So like I think what that tells me is that there's some things that they may have started in America and probably vice versa, but at the end of the day, like, it's been so long that they are sort of like, even if they started being an American thing, you know, these days it's purely British, because no one in America really does it. And if they do it, they're gonna be like, oh, you know, you're doing something that's quite British. So at the end, you know, it doesn't really matter, because you kind of like make it your own. And the Santa Claus thing, that was confusing as well, especially because I want to know more about the history of Santa Claus and Father Christmas, because it looks like it's a cultural, like a lot of countries or cultures had that sort of like figure. So it is kind of like weird to think that, I don't know if anyone can claim they invented Santa Claus, or they invented Father Christmas, or whatever the name is in that place. Because I think it's sort of like it's so known all around the world that I think probably each culture has its own figure of like a man that comes around Christmas and gives you presents. So, you know, it's kind of like the same. So I want to know like exactly the history, what the history is there, because like where exactly was created. I think the figure as we know it these days, you know, the white beard and you know, an old man, the red suit, It comes from the North Pole. Like, maybe those are newer things, but I think it's such an old sort of like figure that I'm interested to see, like, what's the history there, like what was the first culture that sort of like claimed Father Christmas or Santa Claus, and how did he look like, because probably wasn't how our normal Santa Claus and what we think these days is like normal Santa. But this was really funny. I love him. He's so funny. Very like dry humor, but like still very helpful and explanatory. But hopefully we'll watch the other video and we'll learn things that are like vice versa, American things that are British. But that was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.